You're watching a production of Comcast CN 900, your home for local sports, news, and entertainment.
Detroit, the city of revolution, of idea, invention, and innovation. Upon inception, a vibrance of life, culture, and visionaries have led Detroit to possess a story unlike any other. A story of vision and creation, triumph and heartbreak, prominence and controversy. Few other cities have experienced the stark contrast between the peaks of success and depths of collapse. Join us as we explore what gives Detroit the Michigan edge. The city of Detroit has as many perceptions as it does nicknames. The town we warmly refer to as the D was first named for Pontchartrain du Détroit.
Initially, Detroit started off as a fur trading post. Cadillac, who was a French naval officer, convinced the king that the best place to stop the English was at Detroit. He arrived with about 100 men from Montreal in canoes. They set up their post, began building the town.
This 300-year-old city's first structure was a church.
The Catholic Church has been a strong presence in Detroit. We go back right to the beginning of Detroit in 1701. That's when St. Anne's Church, which is still functioning as a parish, was founded.
St. Anne's Parish is the second oldest parish in the country, next to St. Augustine in Florida.
Detroit thrived as a key trading port, becoming the central gateway to the Great Lakes.
It was a busy trading post. The fur trade was Detroit's economy for a long time. Farming was subsistence, fishing was important, and the fur trade was what brought in the money. And curiously, today, Detroit is still the major entrepôt for furs in North America.
Continuing to grow, the people of Detroit would encounter their first catastrophe.
In 1805, Detroit was 104 years old. A lot of the buildings had been around for that long, and they were all timber built, wood roofs, wood sides, and in some cases even wood chimneys. One Sunday morning, apocryphally, it was a baker or his assistant knocking out the ashes of their pipe on some straw. The straw caught fire, the barn caught fire, and then all the other houses around caught fire. Fortunately, most of the people in town were awake, and so they were able to rouse everybody out. Detroit burned absolutely to the ground. There was one stone warehouse that was left, and I think there was an outhouse down by the river that survived. But other than that, the town was gone.
Turning misfortune into foresight, the resilient citizens of Detroit hatched a plan to rebuild.
Augustus Woodward was around following the big fire. He made sure that when we rebuilt the town, the streets were wider. Prior to the fire, they were maybe 20 feet wide. Following the fire, they were 100 feet wide or more.
This new city roadway plan was centered around a 200-year-old Indian trail.
Woodward Avenue has been around in one form or another for several hundred years. Curiously enough, Woodward Avenue, he claimed, was not named after himself, but because it ran toward the woods. I don't think anybody believed him.
Detroit became the capital of the Michigan Territory. However, the ongoing border problems with the British in Canada made it an easy decision to move the capital to Lansing in 1847.
Following the American Civil War, Detroit started manufacturing all kinds of things, particularly things in metal. So we started making railroad rails, we started making railroad car wheels. From that, we started making railroad cars. We made more railroad cars in Detroit than any place else in the country. We got into the making of shipbuilding. We built more ships than any place on the Great Lakes. Detroit really was a big manufacturing town prior to the advent of the automobile business.
The groundwork now firmly implanted in the city, Detroit was primed to take on the 20th century's newest industrial innovation.
When the automobile came along, we had men who knew how to work metal, men who knew how to build engines. In fact, David Buick, Ransom Olds, Henry Ford, Charles Brady King, all started playing with motors in boats before they started playing with them in cars. And Henry Ford just happened to have the connections, the wherewithal, and the ability, the tinkering ability to put together a good product. Ford, along with the Dodge brothers, along with the Fisher brothers, and some of the other folks working in the city, developed his company. Of course, he went out of business twice before he got started and really took off. But once he took off, Henry Ford made 50% of the automobiles in the country. He owned the automobile business, and it was based in Detroit.
Offering the highest paid wage in the nation, this industry took off, making Detroit the automotive capital of the world. Now known as the Motor City, Detroit doubled in size and became the fourth largest city in the country. With access to what would soon become the nation's largest island city park, recreation became a large part of a Detroiter's lifestyle.
Belle Isle has been occupied in one form or another for several hundred years. It was a place for livestock to be stored. It was a farm. It was passed from various families, and eventually they sold it to the city. By 1879, the city decided it was going to be a park, and we started developing it as that. And since then, it's been where Detroiters have gone to play.
One of the nation's major attractions was the Belle Isle Aquarium.
When it opened in August 18th, 1904, millions of people came down here because this is something that they'd never seen before, where you could actually see a fish up close that normally is deep underwater.
This would help it become a popular weekend getaway destination, offering many other leisurely pursuits.
My uncle used to bring us down here, and we would ride the pony carts that used to be out front or paddle the canoes.
During the summer, it's seen family reunions starting in the 1890s, and you'll see family reunions there next summer, I guarantee it.
While the staggering depression put Detroit and the rest of the great cities in America in a somber mood, Detroiters had one thing going for them: the success of the professional sports teams in the city.
Because of the, I guess, our blue-collar nature, there has been a place in Detroiters' hearts for our sports teams. By the time we get to the 1930s, Detroit is winning everything from football and baseball and hockey. We're winning all those awards, but also skeet shooting and fencing and boxing and wrestling. All of those are being won by Detroiters. Detroit was, the city of champions.
Although Detroit was a humming manufacturing town and enjoying many luxuries, it would be thrust into turmoil with the rest of America.
World War II started in '39, of course, and we didn't get involved militarily till '41, but that brought a lot of industry back into Detroit. The government actually brought people from the South up to work in Detroit in the factories to turn out all the war materials that were needed.
My parents came up, like many African American families did, from the South in the mid to late 30s to work in the factories.
Automobile companies went from producing automobiles to trucks and tanks.
Following the disturbance in World War II, the culture in Detroit would present the city with an opportunity to thrive. With almost 2 million people, the entertainment and art scene was flourishing as Detroit became an international destination in the 1950s and earned the nickname the Paris of the West.
Growing up in Detroit was fun. You take a ride in the family car on a Sunday afternoon and drive all the way down to Belle Isle and enjoy the fountain and the various colors that went by. You go down to Hudson's at Christmas time to notice the vibrancy of downtown and how when you were down there were just throngs of people who were shopping and doing business and working.
Detroit's now diverse culture was impacting all aspects of arts, entertainment, and especially music.
By the 1890s, Detroit was one of the real originators of ragtime music. The first song that had the word ragtime in the title was written by a Detroiter named Fred Stone. Following up on that, by the 1920s, when Detroit was really flying high, the auto business was making money, Prohibition was on, so we were the party town in this country. We had two of the finest dance bands touring the country based out of Detroit, McKinney's Cotton Pickers and the Gene Goldcat Orchestra.
When folks came from all parts of the country, especially the South, that music was brought with them. So the blues, Dixieland, country, and then I don't want to forget the jazz musicians. All of those musical genres blended together.
These various music genres culminated into something special in 1959, giving rise to the new nickname, Motown.
So Detroit was a hot music town, lots and lots of great singers and great producers, great songwriters, and Berry Gordy had the knowledge of all of those, had the street smarts to pull all of that stuff together and create a wonderful, wonderful legacy of fine music.
Detroit has always been known for two things: cars and music. And with Motown, we created a unique sound of music. The artists that we had, like the Supremes, the Temptations, the Four Tops, Marvin Gaye, Martha Vandellas, the Jackson 5. This kind of exemplified or just kind of showcased what Detroit was all about in terms of our talent.
Experiencing international acclaim for the Motown phenomenon, Detroit was about to be known for something else, becoming ground zero for civil unrest.
1967 is the riot that most people remember. It was an uprising, a rebellion, if you would, of African Americans who had been oppressed as far as housing goes, employment opportunity, education. They had a very poor relationship with the police department and the government in City Hall. Despite Mayor Kavanaugh's best efforts to try to rectify that, one July night it all went off.
It was on like lockdown, and there was looting and burning everywhere over the place.
It spread throughout the city. It burned businesses owned by both blacks and whites. They burned homes.
Unknown to the citizens at the time, this single event would begin an unforgiving downward spiral for the city of Detroit.
And it really kind of changed the face of the way the country saw Detroit.
I remember as a child, probably 10 years old, looking at the civil unrest of 1967 and how that negatively impacted this city.
The major turning point in Detroit was the exodus from the city after the riots, the economic crisis that developed out of that, and a huge thing was the movement of jobs out of the city when the automobile factories began to close their factories in Detroit. What had made Detroit such a strong city economically, the bottom just kind of dropped out.
Detroit has always kind of had a roller coaster history. It seems whenever there's a change in the economy, Detroit seems to get hit a little worse, especially when we tied our star to the automobile business.
I'm Doug Podell, and this is Rock 900. Catch Rock 900 every Tuesday night at 9 right here on CN 900.
Companies need to reduce risk and protect assets with many levels of corporate intelligence gathering. Mackinac Partners business intelligence, due diligence, investigations, and corporate security practice can help businesses and investment firms avoid or mitigate risks. Mackinac Partners services are performed by experienced former Secret Service and FBI personnel that can identify vulnerabilities and respond to financial concerns, reputational issues, and cyber threats. Make informed decisions with Mackinac Partners.
Hey, Jennifer Fuzzmike, Trooper Money Slang. Aw, scram.
I'm Chris Mike, Jubby Robon, Shall gonna lead up in Kisbet.
Peace, Charity, get town down.
Toothpaste, dummy way.
Bro, na brood.
What?
With the top 100 shows preloaded, Xfinity is perfect for people who want to join the conversation. Catch up on the shows everyone is talking about. Get started with the Xfinity X1 Triple Play from Comcast for $99 a month for a whole year. Call 1-800-XFINITY or visit Comcast.com today.